back to the Nebraska Shoot Around podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Padilla. Joining me, as always, is Jacob Bigelow. And also joining me joining us, I suppose, once again, is Steve Marik, Hail Varsity's women's basketball beat writer, to discuss the end of the season for the ladies in Lincoln. Talk about kind of their NCAA tournament experience, some recent news, and what comes next for that team. And then we'll discuss some of the recent news and roster happenings for the men's basketball team after we get through the Steve's portion of the podcast. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Bigelow first, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm happy that our favorite and only guest is back with us for his third appearance. Third time's the charm. Happy to have Steve here. And there's been some things that have happened for both of our teams. We have things to talk about, which is good.
Steve, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me on again. Anxious to get this started and talk some basketball with you guys.
Yeah, I was hoping to be able to have a little bit more to talk about with this NCAA tournament run. Obviously, Huskers had a great season, but ran into a tough matchup and simply didn't play their best basketball, kind of bowed out in the first round against Gonzaga. So I guess we'll start there, and then we can kind of backtrack. But what did you see in that game, and kind of what are your overall takeaways and thoughts on their NCAA tournament appearance?
Yeah, so I think Amy Williams, anybody who watched that game could kind of see that they really got maybe dominated is too harsh of a word, but they just got outplayed by a really good team in Gonzaga. And maybe it opened some eyes about how good Gonzaga was. I know they played Louisville pretty tough too. So that's really impressive. And just, they got out rebounded. It was a very physical game. A lot of contact was going uncalled in the paint in that game, I remember. And it was just, it seemed like Gonzaga adjusted the best to that. They adjusted to the physicality of the game better than Nebraska did. And, I don't think Alexis Markowski had the game that she was hoping to have. And I don't think Izzy Bourne did either. So those are your top two bigs. And in a game like that, I think the posts need to kind of show up and be tough. And they are tough. They're tough players, but I think just Gonzaga, they had the older team. Nebraska had the younger team, and it kind of showed, especially in that second half when Nebraska really needed to make kind of like a push, but the push never came, and Gonzaga just got that lead and stretched it out. And by the mid fourth quarter, you could tell that the Huskers were gassed. They were very, very tired and just putting a lot of effort into it and not getting a lot of output there. So it was just Gonzaga was a very good team. And I think maybe being on that stage for the first time for a lot of Nebraska's players, especially with two true freshmen in the starting lineup, I think that might have played a factor playing in kind of a big stage like an NCAA tournament game.
Yeah, to add some numbers to that kind of overview, they shot 9 of 44 inside the arc.
Yep, there you go.
Barely over 20%. They scored 18 points in the paint and scored 3 second chance points. And Gonzaga, 14 second chance points, 32 in the paint. And they actually scored some inside the arc and some mid-range jumpers as well and things like that. So they just, like you said, just couldn't get it going. Sam Hybe tried her best to put on her cape and keep the team in the game, but just never could get anybody else going.
She tried. I mean, she tried. The fourth quarter has been her thing in this season, but it's a team game, and sometimes she can do it, and that game she just didn't have enough juice. But it's not all on her. Obviously, it was many different things contributed to that loss. But yeah, like you said, if the inside the paint numbers, inside the arc numbers were not good at all, and that kind of goes back to the physicality that the referees were letting them play with. It was a very tough physical game with a lot of contact. And, if Nebraska didn't hit all the threes that they did in the first half, I think they made 6, if I'm mistaken, in that first half.
Yeah, they were 6 of 12 in the first half.
Yeah, if they didn't make those, it would have looked a lot more uglier than it was. So the 3-point shooting showed up in the first half, not really in the second half. And if you ask Amy Williams, I think she'd talk about the inside the paint numbers and how they really just didn't get it done near the hoop. So
yeah, and that has obviously been a strength of the team all season with a player like Markowski having the season she did. You mentioned struggle a little bit, 10 points on 10 shots and 9 boards, but she only played 27 minutes. I think she was dealing with some foul trouble throughout. So was Jazz Shelley. So that's kind of the double whammy is, there was a lot of physical play in the paint, but they also got dinged up for some fouls and were in foul trouble throughout the game.
And absolutely. Yeah. And at the free throw line too, 10 of 17 for the game. That needs to be better. And again, Markowski was 50% at the free throw line, 3 of 6. So that's obviously, and Izzy Bourne 1 for 4 too. At the free throw line. That's unlike her. So it was just kind of an off day. And I think that's what a good experienced Gonzaga team can do. So
yeah, I guess the last time that we can look back here a little bit leading up to that, because still they had a great stretch run. Last time we talked to you was right before the roster and coaching changes. That kind of happened right after we had recorded. So obviously Ashley Scoggin leaves the team, associate head coach Chuck Love placed on leave, and they closed out the season without those two, and really seemed like the team kind of rallied around each other and got even closer after kind of Scoggin was an important part of the team, the best 3-point shooter by far, one of the best in the conference. And how did you see the way that this team kind of evolved and closed out the season, losing a player like Scoggin?
I completely agree with you that they got tighter, and every chance that the media got to talk with the team, they really agreed that. Now we didn't actually ask, are you guys tighter because of, these pieces that aren't with the team anymore? We didn't ask that exactly, but you could tell that there were just, I think it was Izzy Bourne who I remember most saying, throughout all the adversity that the team has faced, throughout all the ups and downs, with each win and each loss, this team is getting closer and relationships are getting tighter. So yeah, I completely agree with you that as the team moved forward and past what happened in the middle of the season, I think that is really kind of a testament about how close this team was and the culture that Amy Williams has built to be able to overcome something like this. Because once it happened, they played really well. They played really well, and they had some good wins, and they made some noise in the Big Ten tournament. And it was a fun stretch run, and you could tell that the relationship, the culture is strong right now in Amy Williams.
Yeah, until toward the end of the year, obviously they won. What did they win? 2 games in the Big Ten tournament, right? They beat Michigan again, and I forget
Michigan and Illinois.
Yeah, Michigan and Illinois. I'd agree with you. The way they finished this, they finished the season was pretty impressive. Rallying around, rallying in a tough time, and they were really impressive. Did you think where they were seated in the tournament was correct? Do you think they were underseeded? Do you think it was? I mean, obviously we saw the result on the court against Gonzaga, but did you think that being in the 8-9 game was about right or a little too low, or what were your thoughts on where they wound up being seated?
I thought that they were probably going to come in as like a 6 or a 7 instead of that 8 or 9 game. They had been projected, just going off projections, they had been projected to be like a 6 or a 7 for a long time. And when it came out as 8 or 9, I kind of just looked at the bracket. I'm like, oh man, if they get past Gonzaga, that's just another tough game against waiting there with top seed Louisville. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised, I guess. I thought that they were going to come in as a 6 or a 7, but if you ask Amy Williams, she couldn't care less. She was all about Gonzaga, and when you get to the level that they're at it in the NCAA tournament, everybody's going to be good anyway. So just to answer your question, I was maybe picturing like a 6 or a 7 instead of the 8 that they got.
Gotcha. And then since the end of the year, there's been a little bit of roster movement. We saw Nicole Caton and enter the transfer portal, and then Ruby Porter says she's going to head back home to Australia to continue her basketball career a little closer to home. What do you think about those two announcements of sorts? I guess, yeah, announcements. And what does the roster picture kind of look like going forward for Amy Williams' crew?
Yeah, if you had to ask me, like, which players, if there had to be, if you had to pick, like, which ones would maybe like move on and kind of like test the waters elsewhere, I'd say maybe Michael Caton and Ruby Porter would be some of the top two. Ruby just, I think she's a good player. She can do a lot of different things as a guard, but she just, she wasn't hitting shots this year. And I think maybe going back to Australia is just like a better move for her. And it's obviously that's obvious, like what she wants to do and everything. And so good luck to her. And obviously with Michael Caton, very long career. I think she just finished up this past season was her 6th overall because she was a grad transfer, and then coming from California. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what she does. And in her tweet, kind of saying what her plans were of entering the portal, she said that she was working on a lot of school stuff too, which is very, very impressive. Like working on very, Jacob can help me out. She
is going for her PhD. She got her bachelor's out west. She got her master's now at Nebraska and is now going for a PhD. So this is someone. So it's like she turned her misfortune into an opportunity to really go far in her schooling.
Just an incredibly impressive like student athlete. If you like go student athlete, that's exactly they should show a picture of Michael Caton. She's just a really impressive person, and she can play some basketball too. So that's really good. But just looking at right now at the roster that as is, you'd have 2 fifth-year players if Sam Hybie and Bella Cravens both came back. And that's just like, if they both came back, that's a solid core of leadership and toughness, I think. And then right behind that, I think you have four players that would be in their 4th year with Jazz Shelley. She spent this past season here, obviously at Nebraska, and the previous 2 at Oregon. And then Trinity Brady, Izzy Bourne, and Nalia Dillard are a few more 4th-year players. And then you're starting to get into the really young players there, because it's overall this team was super, super young. You'd have three 3rd-year players with Kendall Coley and Annie Stewart, and then Whitney Brown, the walk-on from Grand Island Northwest. And then going back to the true freshmen that would be in their 2nd year next year, Kendall Moriarty, Alexis Markowski, the reigning Big Ten Freshman of the Year, Allison Widener, who's not too shabby herself, and then Tatiana Papa, 6'5", a redshirt forward that redshirt this past season. So again, very, very young team. And if Amy Williams manages to get Sam Hybie and Bella Cravens back for another year, that's just, it's very, 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 very good, I think, for that team to have old veteran presence like those 2 bring.
Yeah, looking at the roster right now, I'm assuming red shirts and the COVID year, and just based on eligibility, I think the roster breaks down to 2 seniors, 2 juniors, 8 sophomores, and 3 freshmen. Just because I think between the COVID year and I'm assuming a medical redshirt in there, I think Trinity Brady and Naila Dillard will still be sophomores next year. So you add those to the big freshman class this year, and then Whitney Brown as a walk-on there, Annie Stewart as well, who's again that the 2020-2021 season didn't count towards eligibility, so they'll have decisions to make, like we'll see with Hybie and Cravens. But that is a massive class with what 3 more seasons of eligibility remaining.
Yeah. And can I just say that COVID year sucks for me trying to figure out like eligibility in years. I have such a hard time with that. I don't like, I don't know.
I was sitting here while you were going through answering the last couple of questions, trying to sort that all out and figure out, okay, she goes here. All right. Which class is she in? And
That's why I'm just going with like, okay, it's your fourth year in the program. All right, cool. I'll just call you like a fourth year player. So, I mean, that's kind of like a simpler way, but like, yeah, it'd be a lot easier if that whole pandemic didn't happen, obviously. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's messing things up for a lot of coaches. It's making it more difficult for us to like, all right, what do we write? Do we write freshman? Do we write sophomore? Do we write third year like, how do we?
Yep.
But yeah, we had to do a lot more kind of mental math here, figuring out, all right, who has eligibility left? But like you said, the big question, I think, looking ahead to next season is the decisions from Sam Hybe and Bella Cravens. And Sam Hybe in particular, Bella would be an awesome piece to have back. The one thing they do have, though, is depth in the front court with Markowski, with Popa coming off the redshirt year, with Maggie Mendelson coming in whenever the volleyball season comes to an end. Mendelson is the dual commit there, dual sport commit, who one of the best basketball and volleyball players, not only in Utah, but in the country. And she is coming in and will play both sports. Still not 100% sure what that looks like, but she'll get that opportunity. Another 6'5", and she can really play. She was well regarded in both sports nationally. So they've certainly got some size in the front court. You've got Stewart as 6'2", kind of stretch forward, Bourne kind of similar, and then Kendall Coley could play the 3 or the 4. And I think she's still kind of finding her way and figuring out where she belongs on this team. You had Moriarty as a 6'1" wing, and they got a lot of length and size on this team moving forward. What they don't have a ton of is backcourt creation outside of Shelley at this point. Allison Widener, I think, is kind of growing into that role. But that's where Hybe, not only her leadership would obviously be fantastic to have back, but just as someone that can go create offense, handle the pressure, and get downhill and make plays. The one guard they do have coming in to join the group is Callan Hake from she will be joining the team from.
Yep, she's from Minnesota, Chanhassen High School.
Yeah, she
2,000 point scorer in her career. Very talented guard, kind of one of the best guards in Minnesota. So it's going to be. Those two commits with Maggie Mendelson and Hake, it's going to, I think, just add to the impressive roster that Amy has built. And I mean, I'm with you. I'm really kind of interested in seeing how Maggie Mendelson is going to work out like in that situation. Cause like once volleyball is done, I'm just wondering like how long until she like sees a basketball court, you know what I mean? Like, is it going to be right away? Like, I doubt it. I think there's going to have to be like maybe a transition period there, but what I like about Maggie is like, you know, she's a 6'5" volleyball player. She can jump, right? Yeah. That's explosion. I'm just really interested to see like how that game kind of translates to the basketball court.
Yeah. And obviously, probably expect a deep run. I don't think the Huskers are going to be done early at the end of the volleyball season. So that one's going to extend a little bit later on. So there definitely will be some overlap there, most likely. And I think Maggie, she's obviously, you mentioned the athleticism, played both sports, and the size, and she's got some touch too. Like watching some of her highlights, like she can knock down the little turnaround jumper. She's got some skill in the post as well. So looking forward to seeing just kind of the dynamic that Mendelson and Popa and what kind of roles that they're able to earn next year, just with that size and length inside. Whereas Markowski, obviously big and strong, but doesn't quite have the same kind of height. She's only 6'3"?
6'3".
Yeah. So you got 6'5" in there, and Popo will see kind of what she was able to do with her redshirt year. She came in pretty slight. I think the redshirt year probably was a good decision for her, especially with their depth. But they'll definitely, the roster will look a little different next year, but overall they'll have a chance to, I think, really build on the season. And like you said, that tournament experience will serve this young team well, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, you bring up a good point with that tournament experience. I really think that really played a factor. Just being there and doing it on that stage is only going to help this program and all the young talent that is on this roster. Cause at times it just seemed like, you know, they were just kind of playing, and Gonzaga maybe had like been there and done that. And they had like all sorts of redshirt seniors and traditional seniors on in the starting lineup. And here Nebraska has two true freshmen on the starting lineup. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. The development, like you said, with the two guards, especially if Sam Hybie chooses to not come back, with like Kendall Coley and Allison Weiner, especially just like trying to grow their games, because each have things that they need to get better at. Allison Weiner kind of, I think, really wants to, what she's good at, going downhill at the basket. What she maybe needs to work on is that outside shooting and just creating other things outside of just putting her head down and driving to the hole. And with Kendall Coley, I think there's a lot of talent there. It's kind of like the picture perfect basketball body, but like just kind of training it into doing something and finding something that she is really good at on the offensive side of the ball, and having her kind of go to that and find a go-to move. I think that's going to be kind of like a really big thing for her this offseason.
Bigelow, anything else that you're wondering about?
No, I think we covered all the bases. But I mean, I think the overarching, theme is, it was disappointing to see the run end the way it did, but the future remains bright. And Coach Williams, they're building something. They've shown their potential of what they can be in the Big Ten, and there's only the only way to go is up, and they already look like they're headed in the right direction. So,
24-9 with a really young team sounds pretty good to me. Absolutely.
And like we mentioned, that the roster change is already starting a little bit here. At this point, I don't know that I'd anticipate much more in terms of departures. I think we've seen two that makes sense. Maybe we see one other piece out of that rotation that whether somebody that struggled with injuries or someone else that just kind of struggling to find their role. Maybe we see one other, but for the most part, I think we've seen the departures. And now, like I said, that the next big developments will probably be the decisions from Hybie and Cravens, and then kind of the coaching situation and how they resolve that situation with Love being suspended right now, and kind of how that progresses forward. So I think those are probably the two most outstanding I guess news bits that we'll be waiting for moving forward. But other than that, you have any other final thoughts, Steve?
Nope. I just think 24-9 with that young of a roster is an incredibly good start for Amy and that foundation of her program that's just going to keep continuing to improve. And look, it's going to be a big off season for a lot of those young women with their game. So it's going to be fun to watch.
And a couple of wins over the Big Ten Coach of the Year and the second best player in the conference. Nice little kind of thing to hang your hat on there on top of all that. So, well, Steve, thanks for joining us. I think we covered a lot. So we will let you go, and we will probably get back with you at some point here. Haven't really planned out the off season, but we'll see. We'll keep you involved in this podcast moving forward for sure.
Sounds good. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, it looks like we are going to be running out of time on this Zoom here, letting people in behind the curtain here. We're going to be running up against our meeting time. So we've got a few things here on the men's side to discuss, and starting with the coaching situation. Obviously, Matt Abdelmassih moving on. Both of us expected that. And the news this week is Armon Gates' brother, Dennis Gates, getting the head job from Cleveland State, going over to Missouri. And obviously, Armon was down there at his brother's press conference, as you'd expect. But the question there is, does Dennis call his brother up and say, hey, I've got a spot for you on the staff? And if so, then Hoiberg would have a couple spots to fill.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we was kind of prolonging the inevitable with Matt Abdelmassih's departure. And then they also announced that Doc Sadler won't be a part of the staff going forward, that his position on staff was being eliminated, special assistant to the head coach, which had been a position on the staff since Hoiberg got here. Two departures that we both expected. Who knows what Doc will end up doing? Like we talked about, all the best to him and his future endeavors. But yeah, that's what we said. When we got to the question of if Armaan would be back, it kind of just depended on his brother. That's kind of been the common thought for the last couple of years. Is we've seen Dennis Gates's name thrown around in a bunch of jobs, bunch of hot board job talk, and he finally gets the call. To go to the SEC at Missouri. He's coaches obviously have their own their own networks. Dennis has been around. He was a Power 5 assistant for a long time before becoming the head guy at Cleveland State. But I mean, like we saw this year with Nebraska's roster, if you've got a brother in basketball, it's kind of an inevitable goal to want to be either coaching or playing with your brother at some point. We saw that firsthand this year. And I would have to assume that there's at least going to be a discussion with I almost said Coach Gates, but there's two Coach Gateses in this situation. I would have to assume that would be the discussion with Armaan. Missouri obviously has the money where he could probably be making as much or maybe more than he is at Nebraska. It's just a matter of if he feels like making a change.
Yeah. And so we have not yet, I'm sure Hoiberg's been hard at work vetting candidates and reaching out and trying to identify pieces that might be good fits for his staff, but we have not heard any names yet, unfortunately. So that process continues, and once we have some traction on that front, we'll probably get back together and discuss it. But until then, we got to focus on the players. And Bryce McGowan's, you mentioned the brother there, and he officially announced he's declaring for the draft. He signed with Jay-Z's agency, Rock Nation, so good for him. This was always the plan, one and done. And I think I wrote today, if you want more expanded thoughts on him, go check out my Padding the Stats column on HailVarsity.com. I kind of evaluated the decision and where he stands. And I think he's a guy that will move up, have a chance to move up draft boards. I think there'll be some scouts that like him probably a little bit better than maybe where he's viewed right now, once I dive further into the tape and into the context of his situation and deeper into the numbers. So wish Bryce nothing but the best. He really enjoyed covering him this year. Great kid. We talked about what he's done in the community, and I think he did about as much as he possibly could have on the court this season, considering the situation that he found himself in and the misfortune that Nebraska went through with the injury to Trey and everything else. So it was far too short, the Nebraska's experience at the first 5-star, but now we get to kind of follow along and root for him throughout the draft process.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of, as someone who's followed this program for a long time and obviously got to work directly and consider one of the people I'm about to mention a friend, Nebraska's about to have 3 guys in the NBA in a very short amount of time.
4 years.
3 guys in 4 years when they hadn't had anyone in the previous 20 years, which is absolutely crazy to say out loud. We could probably, this is a perfect off-season thing to dive into. Maybe we'll dive into it when Bryce actually gets drafted. But, how much a question to ponder would be, how much can Nebraska use? Like we've talked about, this is supposed to be their year to sell, this year to build upon and have something to sell. And when Bryce gets drafted and Bryce is in the NBA, how much are they going to be able to say, we got this guy to the NBA when he's the first 5-star in program history? That's something to ponder, something to think about. But like I said, that's perfect off-season fodder. Maybe we'll dive into it when Bryce actually gets drafted.
Yep. And That won't be till June, so he's got a lot of workouts. The combine coming up there as well ahead of the draft, and so a lot of work to go through before we get to that point. So I wish him nothing but the best, and looking forward to following it. Speaking of wishing nothing but the best, we also saw someone enter the transfer portal on Monday, and that was or Tuesday rather, and that was Eduardo Andre, who I think we were just discussing. Neither one of us were like confident saying, "Oh yeah," like giving a no that he would return when we played our stay or go game. But I think both of us felt like there was a strong chance that he would look elsewhere, and part of that I think is kind of their situation at center and at his position. And if Derek Walker chooses to come back, which is still an if Blaise Keita makes it to Lincoln following the Abdelmassi departure, which I think we're still waiting to see the final answer on that, he'd be no better than third string, most likely. You've also got Oleg Koyanets coming off the red shirt as well, just as another big body in the front court. So he kind of felt like one of those two, the younger guys, would be gone. And Andre's a guy that he played the last 2 years, but wasn't able to really find great traction. I think probably maybe a move down a level would be good for him if he wants to get on the court and play as much as possible right now. He's still got some tools that could make him an impactful player down the road at a high major level, but that all kind of depends on how I guess patient he is and kind of what he's looking for next season.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more about, maybe going down a level. I mean, it all depends on development and, what it would be easier for him to go elsewhere than for Oleg, because Eduardo has tape. He has something that is, coaches can see and at least, take a flyer on to gauge interest. So I liked what I saw from him down the stretch this year. I thought he showed some signs of improvement, and I think that a step down, like Mountain West Conference USA, something like that, could be finding a valuable piece to inside for next season.
Yep, and Nebraska also made an addition via the portal in the form of North Dakota State transfer and former Lincoln East Spartan Sam Griesel, who was a 4-year starter up there at North Dakota State. He played the point guard the last 2 years at 6'6", big athletic kid that can get downhill, and really improved his jump shot this season. He said the game really slowed down for him in the second half of the season, and he really kind of took off as a point guard. He was phenomenal in the Summit League tournament, averaged 27-7, and was really good in a loss against South Dakota State in the final there, I believe. So I think this was a big addition for Nebraska. In addition to what he can bring on the court, he's a guy that really cares about the program, just with his family ties. It's growing up in Lincoln, watching the team. He wants to do whatever it takes to help get the program on the right track, both from an on-court standpoint and an off-court standpoint. As a culture guy, as a guy that's going to be an ambassador for the program to the community, he said he wants to change the narrative around Nebraska basketball. And that was kind of the driving force between him choosing to commit to Nebraska, because he had options from other programs. Like a ton of schools reached out. He heard from Big Ten, ACC. Creighton contacted him as well. And he had some opportunities to potentially pursue a professional career starting this year. His dad is from Germany. He's got dual citizenship, I believe. Could have easily headed over to Germany and found a nice career there playing hoops, but he decided to take advantage of that 5th year of eligibility and is coming to Lincoln. What do you think about the addition?
I like it a lot. We kind of alluded to this being a strong possibility on the varsity club last week.
Yeah.
We didn't expect it to move this quickly, though. He entered the portal a week ago yesterday, last Tuesday, right? And he committed the following Sunday. So yeah, this moved super quick. We kind of thought he was going to weigh his options. He was on the U20 German national team in 2019. So he he's played all over the place. But he's talked openly about how this is a dream come true, and he never thought he'd have the opportunity to play at Nebraska. And he said Fred Hoiberg reached out to him immediately right after he entered the portal. And, he didn't need the grand tour of campus being a Lincoln kid. So it was a pretty easy sell. And, everything that he's said so far has to be very encouraging as a Husker fan to hear, with all the talk around Nebraska basketball and local kids and in-state kids that there's been for the last number of years, to hear a Lincoln kid say that he wants to change the narrative around Nebraska basketball has to be music to many people's ears.
For sure. And I think just looking at it from the basketball perspective, obviously he's going to be huge from the culture standpoint, but he is much more in the mold of a Delano Banton in terms of, if we're looking at point guard, because that is the position that Hoiberg recruited him to play. That was the pitch to him, and that's what he wants to play. He's been told that's where professional scouts like him best at the next level. So he's going to come here and look to play the point, and I don't think he's as natural of a passer in terms of the kind of vision that Banton displayed at that position, but I think he's probably a little stronger, a little bit more athletic than Banton as well. And the shot off the dribble still needs some work, but as a spot up shooter, I think he showed last year that he had made significant strides in that area. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how the rest of the roster shakes out, who else they get to play, obviously who they get to stay versus leave. We're still kind of waiting to see what happens with that 2022 recruiting class. Mentioned Keita earlier, and Ramel Lloyd, another big guard that can play the one or the two, multiple positions there. He's a guy that they have to see, like, is he still interested in coming to Lincoln without Abdelmassi, who was his lead recruiter and the one that got him to commit. So we'll have to keep an eye out on that. We'll see how many scholarships they have to play with once kind of the dust settles on who stays, who sticks with their commitment, and who doesn't.
Because they're one over right now, right?
I believe so, but that also includes guys like Latmayan and Trey McGowan's and Derek Walker, who all have eligibility, but I don't think we'll see all three of them back either.
Yep, I would have to agree with you.
So, any other thoughts on Griesel's addition or anything else that's happened over the last week or so?
I mean, we can touch on this for a very quick period of time. And it involves the big tournament. Big Ten gonna Big Ten. We have two Big Ten teams in the Sweet 16. Many people probably would have guessed two, maybe at the max. They did not think one of them would be Michigan, who came into the tournament as an 11 seed. That's kind of been very, very surprising to me. And then Purdue. Some people could say Purdue has a very good shot at finally getting over the hump and getting back to a Final Four. We will see at the conclusion of this weekend, obviously not Nebraska related, but Big Ten related, because you can never escape the narratives surrounding the Big Ten.
And it is kind of interesting because you look at the seedings and the matchups, how many Big Ten teams actually got upset, right? Like, I don't know. Obviously, Purdue made it through, and I think you were expected to. Yeah, Iowa got upset, but it's not like the Big Ten had a bunch of 1 and 2 seeds.
Yeah,
they were deep in talent, but their top end, like Illinois, lost, but that was a 4-5 matchup. Like that was, and I think even I think Iowa metrics were better.
Yeah, I think Iowa and Wisconsin were the only straight up upsets. The metrics loved Houston, and they beat Illinois. Rutgers loses in the play-in game. Indiana gets torched by St. Mary's after they win their play-in game. Purdue is still playing. Michigan is still playing.
As an 11 seed?
As an 11 seed. Michigan State They won their first game in a very close game against Davidson, and then they get knocked out by 2 seed Duke. And I think
in a
that's
competitive
everybody.
game too. So yeah. So obviously the overall the kind of narratives. 9 teams, and you only have 2 left heading into the second weekend, but that's about what you were expected. You had a big upset in Michigan, and you had maybe 1 or 2 that you thought could have gone farther than they did, but that weren't necessarily games where like just the team falling on their face. So we'll see. Kind of that's obviously the narrative that people are talking about. What's wrong with the Big Ten? Why can't the Big Ten win in the NCAA tournament? But I think the problem is teams they didn't have elite teams.
Yeah, I think I'll give credit to your Nebraska Preps postgame co-host Damon Benning on his radio show this morning. I guess I didn't realize, people love to point to the stat that the Big Ten hasn't had a national champion since 2000. The Big Ten has had 7 runners-ups since 2000, and that is a lot to put it lightly. Yeah. I know it's obviously not getting the job done, not winning a title, not bringing home a trophy. But 7 runners up in the national championship game. I mean, that's almost as crazy as the no champion since 2000. Those stats are almost on par.
Yeah. And that it really is like part of the problem with the way so many people view basketball, whether it's an individual or a team standpoint, is it's all or nothing. Like nothing matters unless you get the championship. And that it just, there's so much more. Like it just renders so much of the season, so much of what we see just meaningless, which is just a really sad way to look at basketball. I like watching the game. I like seeing these journeys, and it doesn't always have to end with somebody hoisting a trophy for it to be considered a success and a great season. So I guess that's enough of us kind of stunting for the Big Ten here. We'll see what happens here. Purdue's defense worries me in terms of being able to make it all the way, but credit to them for getting to this point. They were viewed as a top 5 team coming into the year, and they looked like that for stretches. They had some rough patches, but here they are, 2 wins away from getting to the Final Four.
Give me every second of a possible Johnny Juzang, Jaden Ivey Elite 8 matchup for the trip to the Final Four. I will take all of that, please. So
hopefully Jaime Jaquez can get healthy enough to be a big part of that as well. I'd like to see these teams at full strength for sure.
Absolutely. Rooting for my guy, Coach Lou and the Bruins. Yeah. Hopefully they can get healthy. But we'll wrap up there. What do you got? It's kind of your off season, at least for now, aside from some spring football here and there. It's your off season. I know you're getting back into coaching summer ball, but you got anything to plug right now?
Not really. Like you said, it's we just kind of started the second half of spring football here, so we'll have plenty of football content the next few weeks here leading up to the spring game on hailvarsity.com. I've got a off-season tracker up and running for all the Nebraska basketball moves. So you can kind of get a timeline of how the off-season is playing out there. I'll keep that updated as developments happen. And in the meantime, we'll just kind of be looking to see what happens and react to any moves that happen. Looking for stories. We'll follow along with Bryce McGowan's journey throughout the summer and to the draft and things like that. So you can stay locked in with Hail Varsity. We'll still have plenty of content moving forward on the website, on our socials. Bigelow and I, we have not planned yet kind of how we're going to continue this podcast, what the plan is, but if there's something to talk about, we'll definitely hop on here together and break it down for you as well. So again, I don't know that we're going to go weekly at this point. It'll just kind of be hey, if there's something worth talking about, we'll hop on. Yeah. But
when there's news, there will be a pod. Also a shameless plug for Derek and the Varsity Club podcast. We were on there last week, recorded it on the first day of the tournament and kind of gave a general broad overview of Nebraska's season as a whole. And gave our close to instant reaction to the Matt Abdelmassi news. So little plug for Derek. Appreciate him having us on the Varsity Clubs. Go check that out. And stay tuned. If there's news, you'll probably hear from us.
Yep, that's it. In the meantime, go like, rate, review, subscribe, do all that stuff with our podcast. We really enjoyed bringing that to you this season, and looking forward to hopefully growing it moving forward. So until next time, this is the Nebraska Shoot Around Podcast.
A Hurrdat Media Production.